Sorry, I should have done it. This time. Subject to.
Okay, we're back in open session. The council has been considering, for the record, the council has been considering a general plan amendment for the southeast Pages Lane commercial area. And I've heard from the public, the property owners, and staff on this. The council has the option to, we do not have a motion on the table.
I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
to deny the
General plan amendment.
general plan amendment. My reasoning would be that, number one, we have the landowners here that are asking us not to. I believe that your point that we need to study a broader area, and I think we need more time to study this before we make this big of a decision.
I'll second that.
So moved and seconded that the city council deny the general plan amendment for 12482, the southeast Centerville Pages Lane commercial area neighborhood, for the reasons stated. Further discussion on this?
Contrary to some of my prior comment, and I still agree with what Paul said, but I'm having a hard time, or I may be having a hard time keeping separate the specific proposal from the motion. And I'm opposed to things in the motion. But I don't know that I see an issue with indicating that we are willing to consider residential in that area.
I don't like the way the motion is written. I think we just need to take more time.
The amendment is written? Is there
Yeah.
anything specific in the ordinance?
Well, I've told you the form base really makes me uncomfortable, but I just think that, I think we need more time to look at this and discuss it. I'm not saying that this can't ever happen. I'm just saying at this point, I think we need to meet and decide, you know, what we would like staff to put into it.
Is there reference to form base?
There isn't reference to form
No,
base.
I'm not sure what you're.
There is.
Is there?
Well, let's
Corey's
talk through
nodding.
that because your concern might be very legitimate, and it might be something that we could fix with language. My concern is that right now, even with it being just commercial high, there are a lot of things on a commercial high use list that would not be a good neighbor to the single family homes. And I know that this council has been very concerned about always being considerate to the neighboring single family home neighborhoods. And so the reason I lean towards moving on this sooner rather than later is the protection that it provides to give a checklist of making sure that we're saying it needs to be compatible with.
And when you say single-family homes, there's no single-family homes directly adjacent to this property, but in the general neighborhood?
The general area.
The back of it is Bountiful single-family homes.
Well, just east on Pages Lane.
No, there's no.
And 300 East, which is,
East,
you know,
I guess across the
one
street on
lot
Page.
away.
Yeah, one.
Yeah, and 400 East, which is.
The back side, I think, is zoned R19 in Bountiful, if I'm not mistaken, Corey, isn't that right? The back side in Bountiful is zoned R19, isn't it?
Portion of it, you also have
The west side has just been.
family to the south,
Mhm.
southwest.
So 2017-26, what is your revised language on 2017-26?
Would you remove any reference to park space?
So we gotta go.
Yeah, the portion that's in the east block that talks about considering a park, just eliminating that.
Well, there's two proposals starting on page 5. There's two options. There's option A for the eastern block and an option B. And Corey, isn't your proposal to keep option B?
Correct.
But it's, option B still talks about a park. It says under objective B, the city should consider the use of park impact fees, blah, 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 ideally a park 1 to 1.5 acres in size if feasible. So there's still a park idea in option B.
Yeah, it's the idea that you partner with their open space and get public access by strategies that would allow the public use of that residential open space.
Corey, what
And
you're
that's in,
And buffering.
taking it, but in option A, the proposed park is to establish a meaningful neighborhood park of at least 2 acres in size. That's taking that proposal out,
Correct.
but still leaving in the idea.
What you're looking for, Corey, is goal number 2 in scenario B.
We're having trouble getting to where you are.
Right there, yeah.
You're talking about the park or the mixed use?
The mixed use.
The mixed use is in the
Goal 2.
section 2, age, Pages Lane area, and you're looking at western block segment of 1. And then you go down to the goal 2 of that segment,
Page 4.
and it says, consider the reintroduction of uses and allowance and design standards of the Pages Lane mixed-use subdistrict as outlined in the South Main Street corridor. That's for the western block.
And that's your form base.
Yeah. That's
And
what-
it's,
It
but
doesn't say that in there, but if you know what it was previously, you know that that's what they're considering putting back
And then
in.
it says, or
or,
other mixed-type allowances. So you're going to balance where you want to go.
and
So
since
do you
we
want-
know we're
You want
reviewing,
to edit that language?
If you want to move forward with my recommendation, so that's taking the meaningful park out and allowing some type of future partnership on a small open space area, then you would go back up to the western block half and have this discussion about this mixed use returning to the South Main Street overlay and whether you want to edit that.
Yeah,
That's what.
I'm not,
you're not, what, concerned about that, or?
no, I am concerned about that. I'm not willing to, I don't want to go there.
Yeah, so you would just say objective A, just consider the introduction of uses and allowances and eliminate the South Main Street overlay issue and just add in mixed-use type allowances.
It's on 5.
It's goal 2 of the western block.
So they're on page 5, Jake.
Right there.
Okay.
That's from,
About that, I don't think there's anyone who's opposed to design standards, right? I think
Right.
design standards are good things. The concern is you don't want to adopt the South Main Street corridor design standards. You're okay with design standards, the concept of that, just not South Main Street.
right, that's
So
what
if you
Robin is saying.
If you remove the,
Down to page 5.
remove the
The
reference,
referral to that.
the referral to that, does that, and just say design standards?
So it said, consider consider,
Because right now, there are no design standards for Pages Lane.
right.
Correct?
So I said, consider the
Cinder
introduction of the use allowances and design standards for the Pages Lane commercial area and in considering mixed-use type allowances, if you're still okay with
So
mixed use.
I think I understand that you're saying that there's been a lot of heartburn about the South Main Street overlay plan, and you don't want to reintroduce that heartburn. But the one clear positive that I think everybody in the city could agree on is that the South Main Street overlay plan did put in place high-quality design standards. And I think that the desire that could be agreed upon from everybody on this council is that we want to put in place language that expects high-quality design standards for this area. So if we see a big redevelopment proposal, we know that it's clear that that's what we expect.
Yeah, I read it as that you would go back to that mixed-use concept and either like it as written or modify that concept as written.
And so if we left it in here, as even as you've written it, as outlined in the South Main Street Corridor Plan and Overlay Zone or other mixed-use type allowances, then when we do our next step on the Main Street and let this council review it and make the changes that they want to change to Main Street, then this language would just refer to the new language of.
Or go away,
Or
depending on
go
the
away.
outcome.
But we're going backwards. I'm not going to
Yeah,
vote
we're
on
going
that
back.
tonight. We're going backwards. We're putting it in and then saying, oh, we're going to take it out.
Back out, yeah.
We already know that it's not what people want. We already know it's not what we like.
So then can we change the language of that paragraph to help you feel that we're not going backwards with that one paragraph, but we're moving forwards by clearly stating that we want a level of protection in this area to have to be considered?
Just make it more generic. You
Yeah.
want to adopt standards and use allowances of a mixed-use type commercial. Just let it rest at that. And then let the future do that study.
Yeah, what if you're just broader and say for the long future, 5 to 15 years, the city should consider incorporating mixed use?
Mixed uses and design standards. Boom.
This is a general plan. This isn't a specific zoning code, so I think being broad is fine.
And if the worry is going backwards and pointing to that thing that's been so controversial, I agree with you. I'm 100% fine with just taking that language out in that area. I don't think we need to throw the entire thing out for that one concern.
So what's the implication of just denying it instead of modifying it? Does that mean you have to start over when you come back, want to do a general plan amendment?
Yeah, my view is once you deny, the recommendation is now gone, and we start back. You'll
scratch.
return to just the language that's already there for the Pages Lane area, and
Which
we've done a
is
whole lot of
commercial
modification,
high.
which is basically a commercial high, and that's where it stays until you go back in and reintroduce a new process.
So if the council is interested in adding additional tools and a possible residential component, but isn't necessarily comfortable with this language,
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with adding a residential component. I think that's where I'm sticking right now.
Yeah.
So
remember
I don't see the point of doing most of this if I've heard from the property owner's representative that what they'd like is the commercial to stay there. Then let's let them.
well,
That's where I'm
And don't
saying.
forget, the residential component right now is 8 units an acre.
They don't have any residential component.
so
right now.
I think
In
it'd be
the general
appropriate to
plan,
let
it's
the,
8 units an acre.
let the property owner or the representative clarify that statement, because I think they were asking for more tools, not less.
Yeah, and so we're not, can you hear me okay? There we go. We're not opposed to having a greater mix of tools. We're not opposed to having mixed use. We're not opposed to having residential as part of that. I think that what we would be opposed to is having those limits too low to be workable. And so the idea of coming back with a more comprehensive plan, in fact, what we showed on the board there was in fact mixed use. It was horizontal mixed use. And exactly how it sits or lays out seemed to be the main point of discomfort. So we would like to have the opportunity to consider mixed uses in very general terms and then allow us to develop a proposal or an approach to that everybody can kind of sink their teeth into and like. Does that make sense?
It does.
Just for clarification, the mixed use is only on the west side.
Yeah.
What he's asking is put that on the east side too.
Only on the west side of what?
This is
Where's
only
the-
from the
where's the
from
borderline?
the DI West.
DI West.
This language is for DI West, you're
Yes.
saying. And
So there's no mixed use component for east of the DI.
Right.
we're
They're
saying
asking for that potential.
right now, you interpret the general plan, which is just general planning and not specific zoning, as either commercial or residential. You have either tool to use.
This
But
This
why are
general
we
plan.
adding residential to the west part when it's
We're not.
viable
We're not.
commercial?
We're not.
We're not.
I didn't know the west part had mixed use.
It-
Yeah.
You just said it did.
No,
The
in
wo-
the plan.
They're
in
trying to
this.
get it.
For the
They're
potential
trying
in the
to give us
future,
to get it.
study that issue.
This is exactly what it says.
If you want to remove it, remove it.
It says, maintain and support the commercial viable uses located in the west block for the next 0 to 5 years. For the long range, 5 to 15, any redevelopment should incorporate the allowance of mixed use of both residential and commercial. So again, it's that respecting and giving flexibility to the property owners and the market to tell us, come with a creative idea to make this work in the future.
And I just want to clarify that that's a future mixed use, and that future mixed use for the west side is not translated.
To the east.
To
So
east
right now,
side.
the east says, respect the viable commercial uses, but if you want to start looking at transitioning it to a residential and it can be viable, great. But we're stating 8 units an acre, and we're stating that it needs to be sensitive to the surrounding neighborhoods, and we're stating that it needs to be a more whole cohesive plan in the block.
If you want to
If you want to try and transition. And so to me, it's just giving more options for them to explore with their imaginations, but upping the expectations and the standards so that it's not hodgepodge.
Corey, may I ask a clarification?
Sure.
Does any change in the future land use map ultimately accompany this general plan language change?
No, we do not have a future land use map.
So the future land use, there is not a future land use map for the city, is that what you're saying?
Correct. We do not use a future land use map.
Correct.
The reason we do not use it, it's not whether it's good or bad, the reason is that the city chose in the past that everybody looks at the future land use map as a zoning map, and so they have eliminated the use of a future land use map and returned it to all narrative or graphics and illustrations if need be, so that it's not perceived as a future zoning map guaranteed to get.
Okay. I think for maybe a final point here that, that might help or it might not, because this is swirling, 2 things. One, the east side did originally contain that full, that overlay zoning that would allow the mixed uses and the more comprehensive suite of tools.
Yes.
That, although I know planning staff doesn't want to see that come into play, the landowner group would see that as a very beneficial tool that allowed them, without a lot of complexity, to come in with creative proposals.
Well, if I might be so bold, the one other thing that I was going to say is we had a property owner propose this idea of negotiation. That's very difficult for the council to do. That's not really the process. We don't sit down, not in the public record setting, having those kind of talks. But we do have a tool available for that, and that's if you own a commercially zoned property and you're working with 5 acres or more, you can come with a PDO proposal. And that is more a little bit like a negotiation in that there's a lot of legislative control in that, but you get to use your imagination and your come with a proposal. So.
And sorry to interrupt, and that's what we did earlier.
Yeah. And so I would say.
Don't rely on that, because if you remember, the PDO says that if you have a commercial area and you want to do a mixture of planned commercial, you have to go back to the general plan to find out if that's even an option.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no option for that.
Right.
So PDO is not available right now for that property.
And what would have to change for a PDO to be available for that property?
You would have to assign a mixed-use density to this plan area.
So I would suggest that we table this and we have a work meeting with the council and planning staff so that we can maybe get on the right page, change the what we don't like, have everybody have their input, have you explain some of the things that some of us aren't understanding. That would be my proposal right now, would be to just table it.
This is a replacement motion to your, we had a motion on the table to
Withdraw
your other motion.
Yeah.
withdraw your other motion.
I'll withdraw my other
And make a
motion
motion to table and
to
hold a
table.
work session with staff to discuss in more detail.
Yes.
Is there a second? Second? Further discussion? I see some real value in that.
Beneficial.
Beneficial.
Because I think a lot of work's gone into this, and there's some positive things about doing a general plan amendment that we don't want to start from scratch. So if we could, I think there's some. So there's no further discussion. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So it's been tabled, and we'll have to try to schedule a date for a work session on this. And in the meantime, there is nothing in our general plan or anything else that prohibits property owners from
Present whatever you want,
from
right?
coming with creative solutions,
Right.
even if it's sometimes zoning's going to have to be changed or the general plan has to be changed. But that's how major changes take place in general, as proposals come and we start from somewhere. All right. Thank you. We're four out of five big issues. One left, that is to consider proposed zoning code amendments creating density gradations for the residential medium zone and development standards for residential development in RM and RH.
Mayor, just for some clarification, just start off with, I've received feedback that there is either a shock value or a surprise value or an undermining value, that somehow I didn't deliver quite the expectation that you wanted. And so if there was any offense or concern about that, I apologize. It was never intended. There was some confusion at the Planning Commission. I thought I cleared some issues up at the presentation to the council. Apparently it did not translate to that, and some people either were frustrated or at maximum offended. So apologize that. But for clarification, it's not intended that staff is undermining anything of the council, either a legislative process or any value that the council has wanted in the past. That is not staff's effort. It was an honest effort to try to address the gradation in the changes. What I did is not propose any new zoning districts. My proposal was to leave the zoning district RM as is, with amendments. The amendments were only to the conditional uses section of that zone. That zone conditional use section is right now under the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. It sits that way right now. So the new proposal wasn't trying to undermine anything. That CUP is a range, 5 to 8. As we've discussed many times, CUPs are not a place for denials. They're not ripe places for denials. And because they're not ripe places for denials, the request in a 5 to 8 range is always at the 8 or nearly at the 8. So what I did is took that CUP and split it into two distinct categories, no range, a 6 and an 8. The difficulty is what justifies that split. How do you assign a piece of property a 6 and an 8 in an objective and clear way? That's my number one fear in all of the discussion here and calls to me in discussions is I am very uncomfortable as your staff planner that you can use your legislative powers to deem one property at a certain density and another property at another density without clear standards of why you did that, or if it's selective on neighboring properties. So one property gets an 8, one property gets a 6, and they're on the same situation, same street, same relationship to surrounding uses, and you just simply favor one property over another. I am deathly fearful of that because it is ripe to get sued.
But have we ever done that?
No. And that's what my fear is in all the discussion of densities is I perceive that we're willing to give this, we're willing to give this, but it's based on the moment of an application before you. So the influence of public clamor is allowable in a legislative decision, but it has to have the reasonably debated standard associated with that. And what I fear is that 1 month somebody comes and proposes an 8, let's just say, and you find it acceptable. You hear angst about that. 2 properties down along the same road, somebody comes in and asks for an 8, and you give them a 6 based on the feedback that you've had from previous experience. That's the HFOCA. The HFOCA is the pain. And that's what I'm concerned about, is that you make the legislative decision based solely upon the clamor and less upon what your general plan guidance says and less upon the standards in implementing what those policies are so that they can be reasonably debated. That's my fear. So that's my strong reaction, is it cannot be selective. So what I wrote is just leave the RM place intact as is, walk over to the CUP densities that the Planning Commission is the decision-making body in this case. Right now, it's an 8, 5 to 8, but it's always an 8. Split it to a 6 and an 8, and then write into the purpose of the zone and say, this is when the commission applies a 6, this is when a commission applies an 8. Those are those objective standards. You have to be on this type of road, you have to be around these type of uses. This is how we decide when you get 6 and when you get 8. We have objective standards to it. And so I split that out so that they would decide the 6 and 8 based on objective criteria, as objective as I could figure out a way to make it. Then I went in and added architectural and design standards because of the HFOCA. Little too narrow of a street, not enough visitor parking. How does it look? How does it affect us? Can you use a private road? Can you not? And I added further information on the 6 and the 8, stating that if you're a 6, this is the layout pattern. It's not stacked flats with parking carports. It is either a public road or a private road, but the private road has to be wider now. And that's the style of the multifamily we're going to use in a 6. You have to wait till you get to an 8 before you can have parking lots and carports, because you're on the arterial roads. You're closer to higher traffic areas, greater density areas that need to be buffered. And that's when you use the 8. And that's what the standard I was trying to establish, and simply get you the tools of design and standards of how to apply 4, 6s, and 8s. That's what I provided you. And I'm getting feedback that's not necessarily what you expect. So the frustration is how do we go back? And I think I wrote an email talking about, we're not surrendering your legislative powers, we were just simply repeating what's already existing. Let's go back and draw it back into your legislative powers. Let's bring it back so you're assigning the density. And you know, the two ways is you draw back the CUP and don't let the commission make those decisions. You're going to have staff just ghastly, go crazy on you if you do that. You can do it, but we're just going to go down kicking and screaming the entire way because it's an administrative decision.
We'd like to see Lisa kicking and screaming.
We don't recommend it.
Simpler, we don't recommend it.
Less emotional appeal there.
So much calmer.
Because it just opens up so many difficult problems. So really, the tool, if you want to take the density back, is return to zoning and create the new districts. And I think some of you, that's where you thought you were going. So let's go back to creating districts. Here opens up the Pandora box, though. You've got to create those districts because everything out there sits in an RM status. That's it. It's all in an RM status. You now have to create that RM status and split it up into segments. Then you have to go back into the entire zoning map and start applying which property, which district. And how and where do you want to make that decision? That's the problem, because it can't be property by property that you apply a 6 and an 8. They can't be close to each other. They've got to be in a general geographic area, and that general geographic area is assigned that zone. So if we're looking at Pages Lane, and I apologize that I may not have all the numbers right, but let's say Shayla Park is indeed less than 6, which it may be, according to the emails, and we say that the FOCA is at 7, is over 7, so I think it's over 7.5, so it's close to an 8. And you have that area is now an RM district. It's an RM district. Which one are you going to apply for that area? 4, 6, 8? Which one is that area? From my viewpoint, that is the area that was slated in the community plan to be a highly buffered area to the commercial very high. So that area, from my point of view, in a quick review, is that's probably an 8 district, if you're using districts. If you go over to Pages Lane, We've talked about 8 units an acre. You know, you're hearing folks saying 8 is not enough in the comment periods. 8 is not enough. You're hearing 12. So Page's Lane, if we're going to go to a residential medium, is that a 4, a 6, an 8? You know, which one is that? The controversial place, 100 East, 100 North, and then along Parish, that's an RM district. So if you go zoning districts, which one is that? An 8, 6? And if something over here qualifies for an 8, is that repeated consistently to another geographic area? And I think it's a Pandora's box to go to zoning districts just to make the decisions so that somebody can decide what rezone should they get. The second half of the Pandora's box is you'll take existing properties and have to assign densities to them. Yeah, they're already built out, but you're going to have to assign densities. You're going to have to post a notice to their properties, and those neighbors are going to hear that the city's rezoning the area. So you will fill your meetings with a lot of people trying to figure out what you're doing with your RM zone and what kind of threat it is to me. And if you want to do that, which is fine, job security always I'm looking for, we can do that. But I think it'll create a lot of angst. And so I felt like surgical strike on the CUP densities was the best route. But I'm hearing you're uncomfortable with allowing the commission to make that decision.
Corey, you've made a very passionate and impressive argument. Eloquent argument, very eloquent as well. Remind me again why this council is asked to apply standards all the time, and it's very frequently have to apply, look and say, here's the state standard, I'm going to make a judgment on that. Why is it so bad? I like the plan you have, but why is it so bad to have the council making that judgment against the list of standards as opposed to the planning commission making
For what decision and how is it applied is my question to you.
When a proposal comes for a residential medium,
Okay.
and you've already said this is a residential medium zone,
Okay.
and they apply for a CUP, then instead of the planning commission making that designation, the council making that designation. What's the big heartburn?
Because you're making a decision on the conditional use, which is an administrative decision only.
But we make administrative decisions all the time.
You can take the CUB back, but that's back where Lisa says we don't recommend it, and I say I'm kicking and screaming.
Yeah, maybe Lisa, why don't you recommend it?
And I will tread lightly, but
You always do.
it is difficult for elected officials to make administrative decisions such as, and the conditional use permit has been the one that's the most problematic, and we have a very recent case out of Moab where their city council does retain CUP decision-making. And I think in that case, they made it based mainly on the public clamor, which is not appropriate in an administrative decision. So I think what is important to remember is that the council does retain full authority for legislation and that you get to set the policy. And so the better task is for you to set the policy with very strict guidelines, which I think was what Corey was attempting, and successfully put in a lot of standards on, okay, planning commission, when you make this decision, the city council has already given you your guidelines, and these are the guidelines. So you're actually retaining the legislative authority to set that policy and say when we want that. In my opinion, if you really want to make the decision on density, I would prefer that we explore other legislative ideas like either creating the zones or allowing a PDO where that density decision comes to you with the architecture, with the site plan, some of those. But again, so that's just on the CUP. I think it does put you in a difficult position as elected officials where people are used to you making those legislative decisions and having you listen to their voice. And in an administrative capacity, when you're wearing Brent Bateman's red hat, you cannot base your decisions solely on that public clamor, and it's very difficult.
Your idea is an interesting compromise.
Well, I have a question, Corey.
Yes.
What if, so right now, residential medium is 4 permitted, 8 conditional, which we know is basically 8,
Right.
which we don't seem to feel very comfortable with.
Right.
So what if have you ever had somebody come and ask for a 4 in a residential medium?
No.
Okay,
My
so
attempt to writing that is so we could use it as infill at a later date.
So what if we take our RM zone, do away with conditional use, which seems to cause us all kinds of problems? We get people here constantly saying, we keep having to come back because we don't want 8. Why are you? And we say, well, they have an opportunity for 8 because we have conditional use. What if we take away the conditional use? So we meet in the middle, we take our RM and we just make it 6.
You can do that. That's not the gradation, but you
Right.
can do that. You would simply just now take the RM, modify the provisions, the cap is 6, and now anytime something's RM, it will always be 6 units an
So
acre
give us your
permitted.
opinion on that.
Do you have to go back and change zoning for all the other properties that are already
No.
RM?
No, because you're not doing the gradation.
You just leave them as not.
Just leave them as 6. And so now, now you just simply create RM, the permitted use is 6. What I would suggest is that you save the development standards for that 6, plug those in too, and now the Planning Commission knows that the density is 6, the developer knows the density is at 6, and the public knows the density is at 6, and we come and argue whether they comply with the standards or not.
I think that sounds lovely.
Lisa, would you recommend that one? It seems like that puts you into the realm of administrative decision. It's pretty cut and dry, which is what you're asking us to consider in terms of standards.
Well, that one is certainly, the council is setting the policy decision of, in our RM, our permitted density is 6. I think that's a step in the right direction because I think the planning commission and planning staff and legal staff, I mean, 4 units per acre is really not RM. So I do like, you know, with a court looking at our code where we say 4 and 4, we're not making much of a distinction. So I think that puts us in a better position of having that 4, 6, 8 for residential low, medium, high. So yes, I think that's a step in the right direction. It certainly simplifies things. You'd also want to look at your uses though, because in our use table, we still list them as permitted or conditional. So now actually everything would be permitted in the RM, multifamily, single family.
At a density of 6.
Reconsidering those, yes.
And if you're happy with 6, it makes my life a lot easier telling everybody what is going to happen.
Yeah. Now, that said, I do think that it would be worth the council considering at a later date some type of density bonus in the RM, because there may be some areas of the city, and there's plenty of areas in the city that are built out at 8 units per acre in the RM. And I think some of what Corey put in those standards, like if it's on a busy street, if it's adjacent to commercial very high, or, you know, there's some things where 8 units per acre might be a better development, might provide more amenities and things like that. I'm not saying, you know, if you want to move on and move in this step in the right direction, I think that's good, but, you know, at least put on your plate for the next year to think about how to provide.
Yeah, I suspect that we need to go back to the RH too.
Right, and the
And
RH.
that might be the way, some of the tools we look at is bonus to program and reset the RH too.
Yeah, because right now you're not looking at the RH, so you're going to leave that as status quo, which is
When you say RH2, you mean RH
RH as
also?
well.
Yeah, TOO.
The only, and just thinking about it, I think staff could go back and, unless you wanted to just adopt this, but to consider, because I know Corey said something earlier about in the general plan, we do say RM is up to 8 units per acre in the general plan, so we'd want to consider that. I still think 8 units per acre in your RM is legitimate, and that's why I'm saying I think you need a tool at some point. So you could leave that language in your general plan, but also in your, I think in our own ordinance, at the purpose of the zones, if you're moving in this direction, I think even in our description of the RM, yeah, the purpose of the RM is to permit well-designed apartments, townhomes, two-family dwellings, and condominiums at densities of 4 to 8 units per acre. So just a couple areas that we might need to look and say, take out that 8, that reference, or know that we're coming back and we're just going to leave it in between now and then, because you could still deny it if your use table doesn't allow it.
So maybe what we want to do is give staff
Another shot?
another shot. Now, we've been a little more,
Got another shot after tonight. I'm feeling really good.
Lisa, will you reread that purpose of the RM?
Now, the purpose of the RM zone is to permit well-designed apartments, townhomes, two-family dwellings, and condominiums at densities of 4 to 8 units per acre that are appropriately buffered from and compatible with surrounding land uses.
So
Now, that's it. Oh, okay, it does say apartments.
Yeah. So I would just say that blanket putting RM at 6 is in conflict with what the definition of RM is.
Those are the value judgments you have to make.
Right, and I'm looking at the density map here, and we've got Silver Oaks, which is a single-family home development at 6.7 units per acre. We have Pheasant Brook at 7.1 units per acre. Florentine Townhomes, the high-quality new townhomes,
8.
the Ivory at 8. Courtyard condos at 7.4. We just had a work session on moderate income housing needs, and this really just goes contrary to all that we've talked about as far as diversification of housing units, aging in place, needs.
But not everyone agrees with
That's
diversification
fine,
of housing
but
units.
that's-
You're saying that like that's a standard. That's not
I'm
necessarily
saying that
standard.
as this is my perspective
Okay.
on the idea of moving RM down to 6, because the trend of the market and single-family home builders currently is more towards a single-family home neighborhood is going to be more like 6 units an acre.
we're actually moving it up because we're taking it from 4 permitted to 6 permitted.
Yeah, these are value judgments. I mean, for me, low density is still at 12 as a planner.
Yeah.
But that's,
Our definitions,
I mean, so I mean, it's a matter of value and judgment.
That's okay with me.
So you can do it and leave it for a couple of years, and then another council will change it.
It's true.
That's that job security you're looking for.
You know, if that's the route I have to take,
But Robin, if you were to do that 6, that sounds like there's a lot more language that needs to be changed in order
That's
to
why I'm
adopt
saying I
it.
think we need to tell staff to look into that. And
yeah, we would
In
go back
multiple
in
places,
and
yeah.
show you what that proposal would look like.
But they may not be that substantial. I mean, I think you could just table this
Yes.
ordinance. It would
And-
just be tweaking what's already here and converting it from CUP to permitted.
Yes. And any clarifying points? we
And,
need.
and keeping the standards at 6. But again, I think, to be honest, staff is supportive of coming back with a tool to allow more density in the RM at a later date, whether that's CUP, PDO, some other kind of tool, I think, can be created for that.
I like the idea of opening up the PDO to more uses than the 5 acres it is today. I think that still allows the council to have some control, but you to say, okay, in this situation, it makes sense. And let's negotiate something that works for the surrounding, with the surrounding areas. But
And we certainly could go in, and the PDO is worthy of revision in itself right now, regardless of this issue. It's worthy of revision, and we can have that discussion at that point in
so
time.
do you recommend us doing the 6? Is that something you would recommend as us doing RM 6?
For me, to me, I see your value that the lowering of the multifamily is a goal. I mean, the FOCO was again referenced tonight that is not seemingly acceptable. I like the project. I think it works great, but it's not acceptable. So if it's not acceptable, I can't argue with you on that. That's Picasso or somebody else. So it's just not acceptable. So I prefer that if that's your goal, I do prefer the zone flat permitted, because I do worry about the application in too much of a discretionary way if we can't come to a conclusion of allowing the commission to implement that.
I do too, and I think this way we're going to be saying yes a lot more often. Because we're saying, no, we're not comfortable with the 8, so we're just saying no. Where if it's 6, we're going to be way more comfortable with it, so we're going to be approving many more.
But I do agree with Lisa, we ought to look at the PDO or another provision at some point in time and say, if and when a situation arises, there's opportunity to be more flexible. If we want to say we need if a strategic plan is to look at moderate housing and look for a couple areas where that could be done, whatever it might be, because, you know, density is a design issue, whether it's 6, 8, or 12. To me, it's really your preference. You know, Hafoka, to me, at 6 wouldn't look different. It wouldn't have laid out different. It wouldn't have been designed different. You would have just moved it from the number of buildings, reduced the number of buildings, stretched them out on the street, a couple of larger units, and it's going to look exactly the same. But that's my value. If your value is that 6 is important, then that's the best way to do it.
Okay, so is there any kind of consensus?
I would make a motion that we send this back to staff to be reworked based on the conversation that we've had so that we can see it again on the 19th.
Can you add a little more detail of work on the
Primarily focusing on
6 units
6
per acre
units
permitted,
per acre permitted,
eliminating a CUP at this
and
time?
eliminating the CUP for the time being, but looking at options to go up from 6 when circumstances indicate that that makes a lot of sense. Now, quickly, to me, that means larger pieces of property. But I'm not sure that that's it.
So could I recommend we split that out into 2 pieces, just to come back with 6 and then get the tools for the others? Because I'm not sure that I couldn't pull that off by the 19th. Corey, looks like you can.
It's a little rough for me.
Okay, that's fine, and do it in 2 pieces, go to
Okay.
the 6, and so that we've got something workable, and then we'll look at the other later.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Okay, so we have a motion to table this with direction to staff. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
I just want to add that I know that there's been a feeling of grief about the CUP, but I do still like having the CUP in place. That's why I haven't minded the irony of starting RM at 4, because then it requires the CUP process to be gone through, which does give the city that extra layer of let's make a checklist, let's hear from the public, let's hear what the concerns are and make sure that we can mitigate them, and puts the burden of that evidence proof when there is a serious concern on the proposer, the developer, the property owner who wants to do something, and gives a lot more sit down at the table with Corey time. And Corey is actually exceptional at squeezing out a better product, and that CUP process is a huge part of the reason that can happen.
So do you want to go with 4 permitted, 6 conditional use?
Well,
No, let's stay where we are.
We're comfortable with 6.
yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to table the issue?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
That passes 4-1. You got more work to do. And Dave, eventually we'll get through this and you can apply for a new project. Might take a while.
What was this is probably out of order. What was the density on what you wanted? It was 7?
Almost 8.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Fee schedule amendments for cemetery fees, Resolution 2017-20. Bruce has been very, very patient. He's thinking about running for city council after this meeting. Bruce, any report on this? You're the cemetery guy. Or maybe this was you and Lisa and Steve together. Who's
Yeah,
the
and
staff?
Bruce can come up to the mic, but maybe it'd be most efficient if Lisa wants to address the changes that she's made based on conversation with Bruce and me. And then Bruce can add to, or you can ask questions. Would you do that, Lisa?
Sure. Mm-hmm. So at a work session, the council discussed a number of issues with the cemetery since we are running out of space. And when something becomes scarce, the price goes up. But also, over time, the cost to maintain things goes up as well. And so the council directed staff to look at our fee schedule regarding the cemetery fees and to make some changes. The number one concern was to make it very clear that right now, non-residents are not eligible to purchase a burial right. At all. So on Exhibit A to the resolution, we have here making it very clear in the right-hand column that non-residents are not eligible to purchase a burial right or to purchase the double-depth burial right. The next thing that I wanted to make clear was the cost of the double depths. Previously, we had basically been giving people a 2-for-1 on the double depth because we wanted to encourage people to purchase those. But now that there's only a few left, if any, they should probably pay the same. I mean, they're still getting 2 burial spaces. So I've put a line item in for the double depth burial, and rather than it being $600 for 2, you now pay $1,200 because you are getting 2 burial spaces. And then I also put down at the bottom, making it clear that on the double depth, this was already in place, that on a double depth you paid both the perpetual care fees, but figured let's just put a line item to make it clear that on double depth you pay $600 for the perpetual care fee. And then in our fee schedule, we had divided out the old section and the new section and charged more in the new section and residents more. And I think Councilmember McEwen said, hey, why don't we just charge the same for internment regardless of where it is in the cemetery, because it's a matter of labor costs. So we went ahead and just simplified it and said regardless of where you are in the cemetery, if you're a resident, you're going to pay $400 for internment, and a non-resident will pay $1,400. Now you're saying, how would a non-resident pay that? There's plenty of non-residents that have actually purchased burial spaces, and so they could come in and use that, or they might have purchased it while they were a resident and then moved out. So that's the fee there. And then on weekdays after 5 or Saturdays, again, we're consolidating those into a single fee, $600 for residents, $1,600 for non-residents. So we have slightly increased the cost for residents to $400 and from $320, and $600 from $480 on that internment. I think that is supported by the costs that it takes for those burials. And we're dancing a fine line here. Typically, fees cannot be revenue raising, and they have to reflect the cost to the city of the services, but I think that there's also some argument about that residents have historically and will in the future support this cemetery that non-residents do not through our taxes. It's not supporting itself, and we use quite a bit general funds for this cemetery. So I'm willing, I think that we can support the $1,000 difference in interment fees between resident and non-resident. And while this isn't a legitimate argument, I often say, but many other cities within Davis County make that distinction as well. And when reviewing fees, courts do look at what other jurisdictions charge. So I think it's supportable. Certainly, if you want to bring those down, I do want to be respectful of the council's direction, and I know you said leave the resident fees the same. We apologize for putting that pressure on you to recommend as staff a slight increase, but I think it is supportable.
Well, you just said it doesn't even support itself. We're using general fund fees, so how can you argue?
Yeah.
I have no issues with anything except I thought we had talked about not doubling it, increasing it, but not doubling it on the doubles. And I at least personally would feel more comfortable with 600 and either 900 or 1,000 and 300 and the 450 or 5, because the double depth doesn't double our cost.
Well, keep in mind that
on your initial installation of the vault, doesn't that cost you more time, or?
In terms of
definitely.
you're talking about perpetual care fee, shouldn't?
we have been charging 600 for the perpetual care fee for the double depth.
Yeah. So there's two
we're not
costs
changing
involved
that.
in every, well, three costs. There's the cost of the burial right. You're obviously not getting a real estate right, but you just, the right to bury there. Then there's how much it costs to bury someone, and then the perpetual care fee. We're actually not suggesting any increase in the perpetual care fee. So, but I think your comment is legitimate. You can certainly debate whether you want the double depth to be double or something less, and that's certainly within your.
I agree with the increase. I don't think it should be double, and I guess I didn't remember that we were charging double on the professional or the perpetual care fee. I don't feel that that's fair that it's double. Increased, I don't have a problem with, and I'm splitting hairs, so I'm putting that out. I'm not going to fight if the rest of the council won't get it this way.
How much effort is it, relatively, I mean, I'm not saying you can quantify it down to it's double, but how much effort is it to put in a double vault versus a single, time-wise?
It's twice as much time. Yeah.
Literally twice as much time.
They can only bring.
But that's in the internment fee.
Yeah, but it's not city employees that are doing it though. The vault companies.
They're putting it in.
Right.
They do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we dig a deeper grave and haul a couple more truckloads of dirt out and a couple more truckloads back in and things. So it's a little more effort in opening a grave, but the extra work in the vault in that is actually done by the vault company and charged to the customer. That sort of thing. There's a slight disadvantage in a double depth grave versus two single depth graves in that they only have 4 feet to put a marker, so they're limited in they can't put as big or as an expensive of a marker, and so that's not a deterrent to someone who's looking for the bargain price, but it is a deterrent to someone who would like to have a big marker, and so and that's usually why someone doesn't get a double depth grave is because they want to be able to have a nice big 6 foot long marker that's 3 foot tall.
That goes across two graves.
That goes across two graves, 2 4 foot graves, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas you have when you double up, you just have 4 feet to work with 1 foot of a mow strip around. So you actually just have 3 feet is the widest a upright headstone can be.
I agree with Bill. That was my, and I wasn't ready to fight anybody over this by any means, but I did think the double depth should maybe be $1,000, just because you're not getting the same as you are two. Just like you said with your headstones and stuff, I think we'd be a little bit, and a little bit less for the double depth, and I think the same for the perpetual care fund. Obviously, it doesn't really going to cost you any more to take care of one person buried there than two, but I think we should charge more than 300, but I don't know that it should be 600.
And it's not that big an issue. There's about three. There's about 3 of those spaces left.
Let me caution you though, if you lower the perpetual care fee, you've got others who have paid the 600,
on all of
the
the
300
already
and
sold
600.
out, already paid those perpetual care fees.
I can see that. Like I said, as I looked at this, I thought, well, I was like,
Yeah,
Bill, I was trying to be fair.
So it's the only question whether to charge.
I would not recommend you lower any of the fees. I think you'll be in trouble.
So Steve, if you're talking
if you
about
start lowering prices of what other people already paid.
Right.
And
I mean, if you want
Bruce,
to, go ahead.
to clarify,
Yeah,
we've talked about trying to find additional spaces in existing areas, but those additional spaces will not be double depth spaces,
won't.
correct? They'll
Right.
all be single.
That's
Right.
So really, you're talking about 3 or 4 spaces.
right,
Is all.
right.
That's left to buy a burial right.
Right,
The
they
rest
were,
of them
and
have
they were,
already been
and
paid
they
for.
were, because a tree blew down and we took a tree out and we had blocked out 4 spaces for
Yeah.
that
So it's
tree. And I
not-
think there's still 3 left
Unless
of
we
those.
explore the west side and
Yeah.
find room and ways to do some more work,
Right.
some more double depth there.
The
I
west side's not double depth right now.
don't
No.
want to belabor it. Why don't we meet in the middle, go to the 1,000 and leave the 600?
I'm great with that. I like that.
Support that.
That sounds
Okay, is there a
good.
motion?
I would make a motion that we accept the new fee schedule, subject to a change on the double depth burial right from 1,200 to 1,000.
I'll second that.
It's moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2017-20, amending the Centerville City Cemetery fee schedule with the change for double-depth burial right to 1,000 instead of 1,200. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
So does that take effect immediately, or is that?
You
When
had
does that
my
take-
ears earlier today?
No, I just, so the ladies in the office know tomorrow.
We want it to be effective immediately.
Yeah.
Do we need to do something with the ordinance or resolution, Lisa, to make it effective immediately?
Yeah, it is effective immediately. Look, I see I need to make a change, but it is effective immediately upon passage.
Okay.
But typically, we like to get the mayor to sign it and have it ready for people, but we'll get that done tomorrow.
All right, I think it's on my desk, just, I can scratch it out.
Well, we have to make some changes, so.
That's not on my desk? Okay, it's a different one. What was the easy stuff tonight? Oh, the summary action calendar.
Yes.
Oh, we should have changed a little
Could,
something on
could I ask for the privilege of altering the agenda to take up an item that I'd like Bruce to be here for from city manager's report?
Oh, please, yeah, let's cover the community park pavilion.
Right. So
Okay.
Jake, if you'd bring up the attachment for 11B, the site plan, community park expansion area amenities. As you know, we have a donation. Has it already come in?
I haven't heard if it's coming.
Anyway, we have a commitment for a donation, $50,000 for a pavilion in this expansion area of the park, and we just wanted you to understand where that, our intent is to put that approximately, in case you have some objection for some reason. Bruce, do you want to explain this map and what you're showing there? There's a pointer right here. And would you tilt that screen this way a little bit? Swivel it this way for him. Yeah, thank you. All right, that's good.
So here's the frontage road. This is the existing southwest corner of their community park and the walking path, existing walking path that comes down right here, the sidewalk. And the new part of the parking lot comes out to here. And then the new walking path comes along here, and goes out this way and around the property perimeter right now. So I don't know how well you can see. When I was over on that side, I couldn't see these lines, but there's a full-size sports field here that can accommodate football, soccer, lacrosse, and another one right here. And then this area between the walking path and the sidelines of the, we asked the Kevin Campbell to see how he might be able to fit a futsal court in if need be. That's a plan B if needed. The preferred area is to put it over in the northwest corner of the existing park. And that's what the RSL people like also. They like that too. So we're working with them. The issue was permanent advertising painted on the court versus if they were willing to go with temporary banners. And our initial discussions with them is they think that would be fine to do temporary banners. You might still paint the court in the colors, the same RSL colors, but it just won't have the RSL logo on it. So anyway, so that does fit in case we want to do that or something else there later on. But what we're talking about is the pavilion It's a 20-foot by 30-foot pavilion would fit 6 picnic tables. We feel like the best location for our utilities are stubbed off right here. Of sewer, water, electricity, and everything are stubbed off right here. And we feel like that's the best location. It's closest for people who are coming to the pavilion that can park right there. Our handicap stalls are right here, you know, sidewalk and things. And then we felt that it'd be better to put the restroom building on the east side so that people who need to use the restroom that are using these sports fields don't walk past the pavilion or the whatever might be going on here. They can go to these restrooms and things without having to cross back and forth. This might shift just a little bit one way or the other depending on exactly right where those utilities are. We don't want to put put a concrete slab over the top of the utilities. So we want the utilities that are running to the restroom to run either right on the south side, or if we shift a little bit right on the north side, but roughly right in this area. And then we'll do some nice landscaping around it, some trees and things.
And Bruce, we've talked about the need for a drinking fountain down there.
Yeah.
Is that in the? Are you going to do that together with the pavilion, or is that only going to be with the restroom?
For sure, the restroom will have at least one drinking fountain on the outside of the building, possibly 2, and then it'll kind of what we can get out of the 50,000, and we didn't budget extra money for this year for this phase of doing a pavilion. So if there's money to put in a drinking fountain right now with the pavilion, at the end of it, that would be great. It's going to be kind of decided by how much money we have. If I've got some extra in my operations budget, or if we can get the pavilion built for a little bit less than the 50,000, we have a couple $1,000 we can put in a nice drinking fountain, then we will. But
I think that would be valuable now. It might be years before we do the.
Yeah, the restroom is not funded at this point. It's not in this next phase.
yeah.
We could make people run to go to the restroom
Yeah,
across the fields, but.
Concessions building.
We're going to get the concession building, then on the east side, there's a couple drinking fountains.
But it'd be nice to get a drinking fountain in there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We even if we don't have the money, we could do something cheap. You know, like we've done at the trailheads at the top of Chase Lane, the Rockwood Trailhead, and also the what's the canyon? Ford Canyon Trailhead. We've taken the bell end of a concrete pipe and put gravel in it and just run a pipe up with a drinking fountain top on it with just existing materials and things. We'll have water stubbed off there, and we could make a makeshift drinking fountain temporary, but to buy a nice commercial stainless steel with a water bottle filler on it or whatever, we're looking at about $2,000. So
I have a rubber ducky that hooks onto your end of your tap. If you need it, I'll let you take it.
But yeah, we could certainly do something and just realize it's temporary, but there is a drinking fountain there that we could do cheap and in-house. We could make something.
Great. And have you and the Tingy family agreed on the design for the pavilion?
So yeah, so he's looked at we had proposals of probably 6 different designs. You wouldn't think there's 6 different ways to build a 20 by 30 pavilion, but it's all just different roof angles, and he was fine with whichever one. His main concern was just make sure it comes in under the $50,000. So that what they're concerned with, they're working on is a nice plaque that will have a little bit of the history of the property and of his parents, and apparently there used to be in this wetlands area used to be a pond that would freeze over and kids would ice skate on it. So in the plaque he mentioned some of those things, and then the nice sign that will go right on the roof of the pavilion that'll say the
William and Sylvia Tingy.
Bill and Sylvia Tingy Pavilion. We named that, and then in the pavilion somewhere, either there or incorporated with a drinking fountain or something, somewhere will be a nice plaque with a story on it. And he's working with the sign maker. If the family's going to pay for that.
Great.
So, yeah.
They need a picture of the farm truck with about 8 kids on the back and maybe one out on the front and one on the roof heading down Main Street.
There'll actually be a picture of Bill and Sylvia. He's already given me a copy of the picture they want to have put onto the plaque. So there will be a picture of it.
So with if we needed to go option B on the futsal, then does this location need to change?
No,
There's room for both.
and it works too with the restroom and pavilion and the location that I think it works where this could be used and still not cause, you know, molest the people that are going to be using that. And, I think everything would work if we ended up putting it there.
Great.
And then, you know, someday, if the city decides to mitigate that property, that could be available for something in the future.
And if we don't put a futsal court there, then that's future playground long-term.
Right, well, and we still have room for the
A little playground.
too. Yeah, even if the futsal court goes in. That was part of the conceptual plan originally, was there'll be a restroom, pavilion, and a small playground for younger kids' ages.
Great.
Does it make sense? So when did this donation come in?
So he approached us,
Yeah.
3 months ago or
Yeah,
so?
probably more than that. It's been almost 4 or 5 months.
4 or 5 months ago.
Talked about it for a while, and took a little
their
while.
family would really like to do it. They want to make it a tax deduction for them this year, so that it will come in here in the next few weeks.
Does it make any sense to go to the Parks Committee and suggest that we send some kind of an inspirational recognition letter to some of the other families in town and see if anybody would like to come do the restrooms too?
You know, actually,
I'm not sure if I want a memorial restroom.
So
Hey, I might appreciate it more than the pavilion.
Offered that, they hadn't, they came to us with wanting to make a donation, but didn't necessarily specify a pavilion. And there's prefabricated restroom that we kind of got our eye on that's very affordable, and the North Salt Lake's put in a couple, and they look pretty nice, and they can make them nice. They happen to be $50,000, and so Tinky family was kind of like you, George. They said, well, we don't know that we want to have the Bill and Sylvia restroom building, but we are interested in the pavilion. and a playground, same thing.
Yeah,
By the time you've done
put
your
the name on the
design, and your
playground.
shipping, and your installation, and your surfacing, and all that, you can range, you know, depending on what you choose. But roughly, all three of those are $50,000 items, and they chose the pavilion.
So we'll let you do the restroom bill in a
And
future
there might be
year.
someone that's, you know, been on the sewer district for a lot of years.
We should talk to Dee.
Maybe we ought to
Dee
talk
Hanson
to
has been on there for a long time.
Don't they have a lot of money? Why don't they just do one as a show place?
Because they're turning all of our waste into energy now. They
Yeah.
put all their money in that basket. Thank you,
We could
Bruce,
let them advertise their
Thanks, Bruce.
success on the
for the
wall.
update on that, and we really appreciate your efforts. It's gonna be great. While we have you here, you and Kevin still working on the landscape bid? Because we want to get that out in a
Yes.
very competitive time period so we can start early, like
Yes.
March.
Yeah, yes, they're working on
Kevin's
that.
working on that, and he's actually working on the specs for the concrete pad and everything that we want it to go in before we start doing the landscape contract. So I anticipate the first part of the year. He says the best bids come in January, so when we send them out bid, I think that's what we're targeting, about January.
January, February. We got two priorities that we're working on for bid early next year, Frontage Road
Start
and
construction.
this project.
Because I think we need to get the landscape bid as soon as possible so we can go back to the rec board, unless you think you've got enough cash to
No, you'll have to go to the,
fund that, because we
well,
still got to go back to the rec
yeah,
board.
you'll have
They
to go
need
back to
a
rec
firm
board.
bid.
So prefer to send it out earlier.
If we can get it out in December with bids coming back in January, as long as we want to get them to bid when they're hungry, which is, they come back from Christmas and they go, okay, I got to
January.
start bidding these things.
I think you're hard to get attention in December. January would be better, probably, for bidding.
Yeah, and I think that's what Kevin's shooting for. That's what he mentioned to me the other day. That's the best time to do it, so.
Well, hopefully with this cold weather, we can keep Kevin in the office and working on some of these things. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right,
Mayor's report, we'll see if we can do this quickly. November 15th work session with the Planning Commission should be on your calendar. Remind me what time we're starting. Is that
5:30.
5:30.
A little earlier for dinner.
And then we're planning to have the Utopia UIA folks come during the regular meeting on the 19th, as soon as we figure out what the agenda is. And so, Steve, on the I guess the 21st is when we meet again?
21st is when we hope to have the auditors here with their annual report and the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, in the work session prior to the regular meeting on the 21st. And then on the 5th of December, a work session prior to the regular meeting, which would be an RDA/ACB meeting to review the proposed budget of the Centerpoint Theater for next year and to report on some other RDA matters, some financial matters that Jake and I have been analyzing and researching, that to sort all the expenses over the last 4 years into the project areas and identify what each project area owes other project areas. I think I've mentioned this to you before, and we're working on that right now. I hope to have that ready for that December 5th meeting. So back to your question of when are you going to have a work session on Pages Lane? Isn't that the one we said you wanted to have?
Yes, that's what we just came up with tonight.
How about in January?
You have a new mayor. You need to get educated on this issue quick.
Any reason you couldn't slip to January? Or?
I don't know that there's urgency on Pages Lane. You communicated with the property owners. They're obviously going off thinking of new things. So I'm not sure there's an urgency there. I think you could schedule it in the first meeting in January, and as long as there's time to meet with the legislators, the second meeting in January.
That's right. That's typically when we do that. Have them in for dinner with you before a regular meeting. So.
You got work sessions for the next 3 months planned out then.
Yeah.
Also the canvas of the election.
Yeah, that's next. We'll just make that part of the. Can't we just make that part of the regular meeting? First part of the regular meeting next time. Yeah.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, that's our intent.
Great. Thanks
Okay.
for that reminder. I also wanted to just report briefly, we get a lot of good information at our Council of Governments meeting, but two things to make you aware of. First, I've asked city staff to use the Just Serve website to post many of our volunteer opportunities. Some other cities have started posting their volunteer opportunities on the Just Serve instead of on their city website, and we've got a lot more response. So we're going to try that for a while and see if we get more response. So if we're asking, we're going to, once we get this going, it might be January, ask each of the committees, the Parks and Rec Committee or Trails, when they have projects, we're going to funnel them through Lisa Summers, Recreation Coordinator, as the coordinator, and post them there. So trail improvement projects, etc. Second, I wanted to, Lorna from the Bountiful Food Pantry came and presented, and they do such an impressive job at the food pantry. I just wanted to share some of every month they assist over 7,000 individuals, and often we think in Davis County we don't have a huge need, but there is a significant need. Of those 7,000 individuals that are served every month, about 7% are Centerville residents or come from Centerville, which equates to about 400 people that they've served this year from Centerville. They 2 million pounds a year. They go to 11 stores each day, or 6 days a week, to pick up food. And one of the things I think that is most effective is they're focusing on helping children, and they do these pantry packs where they send food packets home with the kids at the end of the week for the weekend, because they don't have the opportunity for free or reduced lunch, obviously, on the weekend. And they also have an innovative new program where they have a principal's pantry. And they give the principals packets of food, kind of a small box of food for kids who may not have food at home, and they give them to the principals, and then the principals can pass them out. And right now, in Centerville, Jay Taylor is participating in that. Our other schools are not yet, but they do 1,353 packs per week across mostly South Davis County, but quite a few up in Layton and Sunset and Clearfield as well. But the poverty rate in Davis County is listed as 7%, but the food insecurity rate is about 12.3. So, that's more than 1 in 10. And it's really it's mostly, she says, populations that don't qualify necessarily for government assistance, but still need help with food. And they're finding that going through the schools is improving performance at school when kids are not as hungry, they don't act up as much, they do better, and they're reaching the right audience there. But it makes me really appreciate that we have such a great resource in our community as the food pantry. So I thought that was worth sharing, and remember that there are those, they do a lot of other things, dental programs, they help people with jobs, etc., but I thought I would pass that on. Okay, Steve, over to you.
Well, we put in the letter of intent that I sent. I informed you about that via email. Unless you have any questions or comments, we don't need to take time on that.
Very timely with the approval of the apartments and hotel projects.
Yeah, the idea on the match is that the developer's portion could be part of the match on that first stretch, and some RDA money could be used for the rest of the match, and then, but the grant would be most of the money. That's the idea. Okay, would you bring up the drainage issues map? I want you to be aware, this is 11C, that next week several staff, including myself, will be meeting in the field with county staff and Army Corps of Engineer personnel and the owners' reps for the Shorelands Commerce Park area that the owners, the Horman Family Trust, what's the company that actually owns it? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about, the big area that's going to become our Shorelands Commerce Park. Over the last several years, staff have met on and off with them, the owners' team. And we met with UDOT a couple of times, discussing the feasibility of extending the road 1250 west up through there, connecting with 650 in Farmington. What we've come to the conclusion that we've got to address in a comprehensive sense the drainage issues in this area. There's been a lot of study on the drainage issues by staff as well as the property owners' team of engineers, wetland issues, and we are meeting with the Army Corps next week on site because we've got some very serious problems related to the phragmites in the drainage areas. They have just overcome those drainage swells. The culverts are plugged, etc. We need to do some serious work in partnership with the property owner. We have to work on our drainage ways that are our responsibility and the county's responsibility, us and the county. That's why the county's joining us next week. And the property owners will do work on their property, but we coordinate all this effort so that we can get free-flowing drainage through that area. It's really badly clogged. Culverts under the Sheep Road, the drainage along the Sheep Road, and these phragmites is a big part of the problem.
They create beautiful mosquito habitat.
So we'll be investigating with the Army Corps what kind of permit do we need. We think we'll be able to do a lot of this under a nationwide permit that we were given back years ago when we did some work in these channels, and we hope it will cover us for most, if not all, of what we want to do, but we need the Army Corps to give us their okay on that. Anyway, I want you to be aware, there's a lot of effort in that. This is all preparatory so that someday that area can develop into the Shorelands Commerce Park that we have in our general plan. Any questions? Okay. Snow plowing operations, just quickly want you to be aware that we're going to be, Public Works is going to be experimenting with a different plan this year. Instead of putting all the employees out at once and working them for many hours, in some cases beyond what they really should be worked, we're going to have 2 crews. And so there's some pluses and minuses to that. I mean, obviously,
But you won't do it as fast on
we won't get all of it as fast as we have in the past, but on the other hand, we can give better attention over an extended period of time. Just be aware of that, man.
Remind us what the rotation is, 4 hours?
I don't know. I don't know that detail, no. But apparently we've had them on the job for as much as 30 hours, and that's not good.
That's not safe.
Oh. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Miscellaneous business, we have an option to consider the UTA's tentative budget. In the past, councils have not taken action on that, but it's on the agenda if you want to comment or take action on it.
And last year, we just decided not to take comment. I mean, who's got time to review it? So if you'd like,
If we made a comment, what would it mean?
Yeah. So. So unless you want to comment and send any comment in, we just tell them, no, we chose not to comment. We didn't want that to be interpreted, though, as, oh, we're okay with the budget.
You're right.
We make it clear that, no, we just chose not to comment.
So any
So
reaction to that?
when do they want comments?
Well, it's a deadline in
approval, but-
November sometime. We have to send in our comments or show up at their public hearing. They're on a calendar year budget, fiscal year. So they're on that schedule.
And they continue to make changes. I think hopefully some of you saw that Greg, our former Lieutenant Governor, Farmington Mayor, Greg Bell is scheduled to be the next chairman, and he...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Greg was relatively well-known because he would not take any donations from anybody during his legislative time. And so I think there's some idea that, hey, let's put someone in charge. They thought Bishop Burton was above anyone accusing him of anything, and people still accused UTA of having problems. So now I got Greg Bell, who's clean as a whistle, and see if he can
Pull it off.
get any change at UTA. But there'll be changes coming there, one way or another.
Before we go to a closed meeting,
If you'd like, I'll go through it and make comments,
Please do.
just for the heck of it. So don't say no.
Sign in
Oh.
Bill Upton, not the city council.
Okay.
And
Just
you'll-
note the
I feel
deadline in
bad.
the document.
I'm starting to look for it.
Okay.
okay. We need to have a closed meeting, but I'd like to make sure we don't forget this time, we need to have an action to appoint to a board. I think we can do that now. Brian Plummer, apparently we missed reappointing him to the landmarks. I thought we did it, but
How did we?
apparently it didn't in the end of one of these meetings. So I would like, Brian has served well, and he's willing to serve another term on the landmarks. So
He's the chair.
he is the chair. So I'd like a motion to reappoint him to a second term on landmarks.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. And then I'd look for a motion to go into a closed meeting for reasons allowed by state law, specific to
Discuss the
considering
character and competency of
competence
individuals.
Of individual.
Yep.
So moved, with no intent to return to adjourning the city council meeting.
Correct.
Second.
So moved and seconded. We need a roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
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 And we can
Oh,
let,
no, Did I make the motion? No,
We-
I
we-
have seconded.
And we can let Marcia go. She deserves to go home.
She's wondering why she gave up this job.